Okay, today is Wednesday, September 16th. We started last night talking about your childhood and growing up, and then your high school days, your Fordham University days, and then on into the service. And we got as far as the last of 3 instructor tours instructing in the Stearman, which was Norman, Oklahoma, around the middle of 1943, around August or so.
Actually, it was I was in Norman from March to July of '44.
Yeah, in fact, why don't you go over those dates that you got there?
Okay, I can start. My naval aviator training started in Philadelphia in April of 1942.
Okay, very good.
And I remained there, and I soloed, and we flew out of the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and we did our soloing out of Camden, New Jersey, which was across the river.
Right.
And in July, we received our orders to go to Pensacola. And we left by train, and it took about 2 or 3 days. And we got down there, and then the serious training started. And see what I have for Pensacola here. Oh, here. Yeah, I put in 233 hours in my training, and I was up until I got my wings.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we knew how to fly, but we were just scratching the surface at that time. And I got my wings in December of, we got into Pensacola in August of '42, and I got my wings, came home by train from Pensacola in around Christmas time in '42.
Right.
And then I got orders to fly P-boats. P-boats was my major in Pensacola.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sent to Norfolk, NAS Norfolk, Virginia. And that didn't last. We went to school for a week or so, and then the strike of the Martin plant, they made the PBM ones. And we were learning the PB4B or something, which was a more advanced thing, but there were a lot of automatic things that never worked too well. And finally they decided they had to disband us and put us to work. So we all got transferred to primary instructors. And we sat around there for about 2 or 3 weeks waiting for the orders to come in. And I drew Los Alamitos, and I didn't know where the heck that was, but it's pretty near Long Beach, California.
Were you going to pick some type of training assignment? I mean, the only thing you were picking was different training bases, or could you have picked like a fighter plane?
We weren't able to pick them, we were just given it.
But was it going to be an instructing tour, for sure?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, then I had my 15 days of leave. I was getting 15 days of leave. And I flew out there, and I believe I stopped by to visit my brother Jim in Ashtabula, Ohio. he was a construction engineer, and they were building some kind of important war effort factory to build something, and we had a nice visit, and we went downtown to Cleveland, and had a nice dinner at a hotel there. And then they took me to the airport. I think I got on a TWA plane to go west to Los Angeles and Long Beach area where Los Alamitos was. So that was in, I reported to Los Alamitos early in February of '43. And I was there for up until, it was a short stint because it was like 6 months, and I had a total of 759 hours when I left Los Alamitos, and I was transferred to Hutchinson, Kansas. And I was at Hutchinson from September '43 to February of '44. Then I went to I was transferred to Norman, Oklahoma, for the same type of stint of instructing primary. And in July of '44, I was only in Norman for like 4 months, 4 or 5 months. I was given orders to transfer to
VR2?
no, not VR2. I was to start my training for transport work.
Okay.
And that's when the training started.
Right.
So in September, let's see. Oh, okay. So in August of '44, I left Norman and went to instrument training, and that was given at Atlanta Naval Air Station. And it involved in a SNB, what's the name? Well, you have a different name for that, I believe.
SNB?
It's a twin engine.
A Beach 18?
Beach 18, yeah.
That's probably what the B is for. Beechcraft. It's got a twin tail, twin vertical stabilizer.
Yeah, it was a great
tail
plane.
dragger plane. Yeah, they're still flying around.
The sad part was we never landed or took it off. Well, I guess we were handed it just about after they pulled off the ground.
Because you had your hood, you had your
I went under the hood
vision restriction.
And we're going up and down. It's funny, the places where, you and I flew in that sunny afternoon, and we had the wasps trying to keep us out of the sky.
I took off out of just north of Greenville.
Right.
And flew from Rutherfordton, which is just above the North Carolina-South Carolina border.
Oh, okay.
Down across the border. We didn't have our passports, but we flew down across the border in South Carolina.
South Carolina, yeah. That was pretty neat. But anyway, that's when I started my training and my instrument training. And I was doing link training, and we had link training trips that we made. And I think they took my life one day. They had an air traffic control room, and we had to call up, and
get your clearance.
clearances and all this. And then I made a report. I at 8,000 feet over such and such a fix. And then about a minute later, there was another plane was going the opposite direction over the same fix. So they went on like nothing happened, but I talked to the operator of the link, and I said I didn't appreciate getting killed. So, also, let's see that, and this was in the Beach 18 that we were doing this real day and night operation up and down the mountains.
Blue Ridge Mountains?
Yeah, right. And that was in August, and yeah, what do you call it, simulator?
The link?
The link. The link was, we flew actual flights in the link. Well, that's what I was just finished saying, but then when we finished that, and they thought we knew something about instrument flying, we went into the SNB, which was the Beach 18, and that lasted quite a few hours, like almost 100 hours.
Wow.
And we flew day and night out of the beach, and that was, for real, because you're going up and down these airways.
Right.
And, there were real airplanes going.
Great way to learn.
And we were talking to the traffic controllers. So that was very good instruction. And then to top that, in September, we were transferred to the American Airlines checkout of the DC-3. And that lasted 30 days.
Wow.
And we flew day and night. Not always night, but we did have night flying. And we were in crews of 2. And I looked at my book, and it's got the name of Jackson, who was my flying partner. And we just swapped, and the instructor sat in the right seat. And the 2 cadets swapped out.
Between the left seat and the jump seat?
Yeah, right. Which was very good, because we did an awful lot of good stuff there.
That was your first big airplane training that you'd ever done?
Yeah, and the guy teaching the maintenance of the DC-3, he could draw you a picture of any of the components. And of course, we had the hot water stove that was getting heat off one of the engines to make it hot, and then we blew the air into the cabin.
That's ingenious.
So it was one of the most thorough flight schools I ever went to. Really. I mean,
30 days.
What?
In 30 days, that's really fast-paced.
Well, of course, it was during the war, and they didn't want to fool around, but they were very no-nonsense American Airlines.
They're still that way.
And my instructor there was Cliff Haney, I think his name was. And at the end of the training school, why, he gave us applications for American Airlines.
Wow.
But the sad story about why I didn't conveniently get into flying commercial was that there were so many thousands and thousands of pilots, and some good, some bad, but there were so many pilots. I mean, they were flying bombers, they were flying helicopters, whatever they were flying. There was just too many pilots. And then I guess some people have commented that I guess I really didn't want to fly, because I didn't pursue it, you know. I mean, I should have, I don't know whether I could have gotten on with American, but I filled out the application, but I think they were going to call me or something.
Well, you would have had to spend some money to get your military certificates transferred to civilian.
That's exactly right.
And that would have cost
Probably
probably,
about $3,000.
which in 1947 or 48 would be like $30,000
Yeah, right.
today.
Exactly. So that was sort of a fork in the road, and I chose to go back to accounting.
Mhm.
But I did stay with the airlines. You know, when I went to the agency to get a job at the end of the war, they only told me it was an airline. And this friend of mine, Mike Hume, he was instrumental. He knew this girl who was the head of the employment agency. And they did a pretty good job because they would get the jobs and they would check you out to see whether you really had enough expertise to do the job that the company wanted you to do.
Excellent.
And it was, and of course, it was a auditing job for, and of course, before the war, I had graduated from Fordham University with a BS in Business Administration and with a major in accounting.
So okay, you worked for Price Waterhouse to try to get accounting experience. You left Macy's and you went to Price Waterhouse, took a pay cut to go to Price Waterhouse. But then, how long were you at Price Waterhouse total?
Barely 2 years, because they were hot and heavy in, can't remember the name of the oil company in Saudi Arabia, but Price Waterhouse was supposed to oversee the operation in Saudi Arabia. And I was looking at big bucks, you know, because the supply people who were over there just doing supply were getting horrendous salaries. And
horrendously good or horrendously bad?
Horrendously good. And so I expected a nice big, and what I had in mind was I wanted the money, I wanted half of my salary booked into a bank in New York, and then I would take the other half it was sort of like a 2 or 3 year deal.
Will you be living in Saudi Arabia? Yeah.
So the thing that queered the whole deal there was that I said, well, you know, what's the salary situation? And they said, oh no, you'll be making the same salary you're making now. And that was like $200 a month, and it was just
there'd be no incentive. Yeah.
So I just bowed out.
And left in like 1948?
Yeah, it was in well, actually, I stayed at Price Waterhouse for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Just about 2 years. It was from 1946 was when I got out of the Navy. I was still in the reserves, but I got out of the active duty. And it was important for me to get 2 years of public accounting experience, and I really enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun because we did paper mills down in Virginia, at Covington, Virginia, not Kentucky.
Right.
There's a Covington, Kentucky, near
the airport, Cincinnati Airport.
Yeah, right, near Cincinnati. So that queered me as far as staying with Price Waterhouse. Now, I didn't have my CPA yet, and but I did pursue it, and I initially went to Washington. I was living in New York at the time, and I didn't have a good enough resident requirement to really sit in New York. So I was told to go to Washington, and I went down there. Went down there, and I passed 3 parts of the CPA exam. And then at that time, this was in the early 50s, Jerry was anxious to get back to Tulsa because it was living in New York. If you're not rich, it's a tough grind.
Mm-hmm. It's still that way. You have to make probably twice as much as you would make living in New York to live anywhere normal.
Yeah, right. So I sat in Washington, and as I say, I only passed 3 of the parts.
Out of 4?
What?
3 out of 4 or 3 out of
3 or 4. But you could retain it for, and just, I don't know, I guess it might have been the larger part. They were, like business law and auditing, and then taxes. They were just getting into taxes. Fortunately, when I got out of the service, I went and took it wasn't H&R Block, but it was some training school, and that was important because I had passed with an A out of Fordham the tax portion of my course.
Right.
But this is 5 years later, and I was away. I was not practicing it at that time.
So did you ask American if they would transfer you from New York to Tulsa?
Well, the way that worked out was Bob Musial, my good friend, who was on the auditing team. Well, I hadn't gotten to getting my job at American. I guess it was while we were living in New York, my friend Mike Hume said, Frank, you need to get your, well, we went all through that, getting my CPA.
Right.
And I can't remember, see, it was 46 when I went, well, see, I was still working at Macy's when I went back to work out of the war. And so then my chief auditor of Macy's said, look, you've got to get your CPA. And he put me in contact with Price Waterhouse. That's how I got into Price Waterhouse. It was after that I figured, well, the heck with this.
Because of the Saudi Arabia deal.
And so Mike Hume knew I was looking for a good job, and he knew I was interested in the airline. So he said, why don't you go, he put me in touch with this lady, and she, and I knew it was going to be either United, American, or TWA, just because I had studied a lot of these annual reports, and I was interested in, and after, being a pilot, I was, I didn't mind doing paperwork, but I wanted to be associated with airlines.
Mm-hmm.
So I called up the lady on the day I was supposed to go for my interview, and they had it all set up, and I said, well, where's the company, And she said, well, it's American Airlines.
That's great.
So I went there, and I had done it like you guys had done for getting your jobs.
With the practice.
Yeah, I really know, basically, for the three airlines, I can almost swear that it was going to have to be the three, because they said it was a big airline. And I read the annual reports and had enough information, and United was they were the ones that were involved in all of the ice and snow up north.
They still are. They still are that way.
And so I had a very good interview with Bob Lynch, who was the chief auditor of American Airlines. But he was not as legitimately a good auditor or a good accountant. He came out of the FBI, and of course, Bill Hogan, who was the sort of the wild man, who was the chief financial officer of American at the time, was he sort of, ran American Airlines and the accounting end of it, because he knew what he wanted, and he was very uncontrolled. In fact, his middle age, maybe she was like 30 or 35 years old, but she told off Wild Bill Hogan, they called him, and he started using bad language to her, and she said, Mr. Hogan, I appreciate working for you, you're a great man and all that, but I cannot tolerate bad language. And when he found something wrong with the cashier was sort of a fairly young guy, and he made a mistake one day, and Bill, and we heard this noise. He screamed all the way out of his office and down, and the cashier didn't. He had just like an open desk where he worked, and she has a beautiful car, beautiful lady too. What do they call that thing? It's like a van.
It's some sort of minivan.
Yeah, it's really. And you said that she says that they only get red cars.
They only get red cars.
Well, that's like us. We didn't have a red car in Tulsa. Remember? Chief?
No, I've seen pictures, black and white pictures.
I guess you were hardly born.
I was probably not born.
But anyway, I got the job, and it looked like a pretty good job. But and I think I told you, and I don't necessarily have to go back and do that again. But the strike that we pulled on the auditing department at American Airlines and won. That was a great thrill.
What year was that?
That was in like 47, no, 48, 49, and we're trying to save money, and they just put out a directive saying we're going to have to double up on when we're on the road. We had like 4 or 5 auditors on a big audit, and we're just going to have to double up. And just as some of the more seasoned guys, he said, well, you know, and he said, just, you don't have to have steak every night. And he said, well, when you're on the road, steak tastes like ground beef, you know. So, I mean, no big deal.
Right. You have to treat your people the way they deserve to be treated.
So we made out pretty well. And Bob Musial, who was my bosom buddy, and we had the same likes and dislikes, and we just liked to do a lot of good things. And one time, I guess it was in June of 1950, we were in San Francisco doing the audit there, and we got orders to go to Mexico to audit the air freight there. And Bob Musial and I were supposed to go down. And we didn't have passports, so we had to go in San Francisco and get our passports. And then we went down for the whole month of 1950, June. And
Mexico City?
Well, yeah, we lived in Mexico City. And of course we had this great auditor for American Airlines to Mexico, Hector Morones. And he was a great help because he was a great interpreter. And he was a good auditor too. So Bob and I went down there and we got back, and I think the Korean War was just getting started around the 1st of July. So anyway, where am I?
You're talking about American in the early to mid 50s.
Right. So, I have to back up, I guess, because that was after I went through all this.
Yeah, actually, where you stopped was with the flying boats.
Well,
You finished your Atlanta, DeKalb, Peachtree instrument school,
that's right.
and then you were going to go fly R4Ds.
That's right. We covered the instruction phase. And I see here that I was based at NAS Olathe, which was, when I was in Hutchinson, Kansas, I just looked at my logbook, and almost every other week, when I had when I had like 2 days off, I would fly up to Hutchinson, fly up to Olathe, Kansas. It was like 200 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go up early in the morning and George Burnett wasn't involved in that. He was training he was instructing in dive bombers down in, what's the place down in, I think it's in Georgia, but it's right on the ocean.
Brunswick?
Yeah, I think there's another name for it. It's like a honeymoon place. A lot of people go down.
Tybee Island?
Well, it's in there. I can't think of the exact name, but it's sort of a fancy name. But anyway, he was in the war. George Burnett was based down there, and he was instructing in these I don't know who made the plane, but it was a dive bomber, and it was a new dive bomber. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like the SBD.
Mm-hmm.
And this could have been made by Boeing or somebody, as far as that goes. So I sort of lost touch with George, and I was in touch with him again when I was auditing around the country. Every time I went to San Diego to audit,
Mm-hmm.
we flew the
Detail Bonanza?
Bonanza.
That's great.
And so...
Well, after you finished your instrument school in Atlanta, did you go immediately to Olathe?
I went to Allaire and I did some instrument flying there. And there was PR3, which was the transport, and that was based at Olathe. That's why we went there.
Operational transport or training for transport?
Well, they did some of the training, but it was an operational, and we had a network that covered the United States pretty much. We used to have a hotshot plane that would take important mail and stuff from Washington to the West Coast out to San Francisco, and it left at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
How long would it take to get across the country back then?
I don't know. I don't know what kind of plane, whether they were doing it in DC-3s or not. They probably were, maybe a couple of stops.
Maybe DC-4?
I don't think so.
So you'd have to make more than a couple of stops in a DC-3, wouldn't you?
I guess so.
Probably have to stop 4 times or so.
Yeah, right. I remember what was it, 800 gallons we had, I think. Was it 800 or 400? 400 times 6 would be...
How long could you fly for? 6 hours?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about going out to the BR-13 now just temporarily. We flew 4 hours a crack out there.
So it'd have to be way more than, it'd have to be 800 gallons because I think the DC-3 burns about 160 gallons an hour. 80 per engine.
That's a little high, I think. I don't think it was that much. I mean, we watched the cruise and we had automatic lean, but I believe we thinned out we thinned it down until it started missing a little bit.
But still, 400 gallons doesn't seem like enough to fly for 6 hours.
I didn't say, I mean, I think most of the stuff in the DR-13, and that was my main impression of the DC-3, why, we know as long as, it was like maybe 400 miles apart.
Right.
And I don't know how many gallons we used for 400 miles.
Right.
Just,
But you're at Olathe, and how long did you spend at Olathe before you moved on, and where did you go next after Olathe?
well, I was waiting for orders, and I didn't have any inkling exactly where I was going to end up. And of course, Ed Lopato from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, was a great friend of mine, and he was I guess he was a Polak. He was Ed Lopato. He lived in Wilkes-Barre, and after the war, I used to go and visit him on weekends, and he gave me a date.
A friend indeed.
Yeah, but his grandfather, he smoked a pipe. He smoked a pipe because he said he was a poor boy. That's all he could afford. But he preferred cigars. So every time he'd go home, and his grandfather would say, "Look, Ed, don't be just a pauper. Like, here's $10. Go get yourself a nice big box of cigars." So we had a lot of fun with him. He was really nice.
He was your buddy in Olathe?
Oh yeah, sure.
So would you spend 2 months in Olathe?
Yeah, oh yeah, I have it down below here. Yeah, that came after the training in Meacham Field for the month of September.
So you went from Atlanta to Meacham Field?
Yeah, that was all instrument training in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
And
SNBs?
What do they call it? The
Beach 18s.
Beach 18. And that was really real flying. And you know, when you're talking to the, at that point, we hadn't had any real experience in talking to traffic controllers. Of course, I don't know how great they were in those days anyway, but it was pretty exciting.
How about what type of plane did you fly at Meacham? SNB also?
At Meacham?
Yeah, you went to Meacham after Atlanta.
That's true, but it was the DC-3, and that American had thousands of those planes.
So
But these were R4Ds, and brand new. They were just come from the factory, I guess, and the instructors were hotshot American Airlines pilots.
that's great. So then, after you left Meacham, was Meacham?
I went to Allaire then,
Okay.
and that was like in January of '45, and I might have gone to Allaire in the fall of '44 because
Right.
we were in and out of Meacham by October, you know, and then we spent time in Allaire,
Mm-hmm.
and we played around, we went downtown, and had a good time. It was, and I think Ed Lepato had a car, and I don't think George Burnett was there. It was probably either Ed Lepato or someone else had a car, so you know I never had a problem. And even when I was in Hutchinson, which was long before that, back in '43. It wasn't a question of mooching, you know, I couldn't drive up from Hutchinson to 200 miles to Olathe. So I'd get up early in the morning and I'd fly, and because I always had the sun in my eyes every time I went to Olathe, because I left early in the morning and then I stayed as late as I could. I didn't particularly want to fly. We weren't supposed to be flying night fly without a radio and all that. And steering. So we'd have to watch the sun, you know. And then the sun would be in my eyes on the way back.
That's from Wichita to Olathe?
No, from Hutchinson.
Oh, okay.
Hutchinson's near Wichita. You know where? Wichita, right?
Where McConnell Air Force Base is.
So
where'd you go after
So
Olathe?
Olathe, then we got orders. And I got orders to VR2.
Which is?
Alameda, California.
So, flying R4Ds?
Oh no, that's what the VR2 is all flying boats.
So you went to Meacham to get DC-3 qualified, but then
Yeah, well,
you left and you didn't fly DC-3.
No, but they needed us more in flying flying boats. You know, I mean, it was just that we were better pilots in flying, you know, transports of some kind.
So they
whether
sent-
it was a flying boat or not, it really didn't.
So they sent you to Meacham because it was the fastest, best way to get you heavy airplane experience,
Exactly.
even though it wasn't the kind of plane you were going to be flying.
No, but it ended up, and it was my doing that when I was going through Honolulu, I went to the personnel office and I said, look, I want to go to VR13.
Well, wait a second, you're going to get me confused. First you went to VR2 in Alameda, and how long did you spend there?
Well, not too long. And I was pretty boring, I'll tell you. Flying
Flying
130 miles.
PB2-wise?
Yeah, right.
4-engine Coronados.
Right. So I reported in February of '45. You know, we're getting toward the end of the war.
Right.
And I was there through my birthday in May. So it was February, and it was constant flying though.
Mm-hmm.
of hours. Let's see, I had 2,200, oh no. I put on over 200 hours from when I left Olathe and when I wrapped up at the end of BR2, so it was 200 hours.
In about 3.5 months?
Yeah, from January to May, not including May.
Right. So then you...
So then I arranged, and the guy in Honolulu says, oh yeah, how much leave do you want? You know, oh, 15 days.
You mean you were on a trip that you were on like a TDY from Alameda out to Hawaii when you coordinated to go out to VR13?
No, I just did it on my own. I mean, I was just out there. We laid over in Honolulu.
And you just went in and talked to the personnel guy?
Yeah, hey, you know, because I had already sent Josh Langfa in that ferry flight, that was something that most people would really shudder about.
What, that ill-fated one from Los Alamitos to Luke in Phoenix?
Oh no, I mean that was just a storm, you know, that ruined our airplanes.
Which ferry flight are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about the what was I talking about?
Josh Langford, you said most people would shudder about the ferry flight?
He and Bulldog Smith's wife and I were, Bulldog Smith wasn't in San Francisco, but she wanted to go down and see the BR-13 planes take off from Oakland Air Force Base. And I mean, you know, so it was Bulldog Smith's wife, but, you know, we were all on the thing together, so
right.
It was, I mean, the only thing we ever did was, you know, we'd go out to dinner or something.
Right.
That's about it. But, so no, I'm saying that Josh really talked me into going out to BR-13.
Right.
So that was why I knew I wanted to go there. And I had done a lot of shopping with him of buying phonograph records, the 12-inch and all that. And I was really worried about them whether they were going to get off the ground because I knew they were over the limit. And the limit was like, theoretically, it was supposed to be like 32,000 pounds. But it was, the max was like 35,000. And I think I'm sure we were over that. Because the engines were good. These were pretty good new planes, I think, R4Ds.
When you were all getting ready to... Oh, but Josh Langford was already over in VR-13.
Yeah, he went over a month or so before I made my deal with them in Honolulu.
Right.
And then it was early in May that I flew out to VR-13 to go to work.
And where is VR-13? In the Philippines?
It's in Manus.
Okay, it's in Manus.
Down in the 2 degrees south latitude, and it's down near New Guinea.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I got in trouble going up to the cockpit. And just,
on that flight?
Yeah, on that, it was a DC-4.
Go.
Like I had to go out from Oakland and continue going out. I think we just kept going and going.
But
going.
You had to go from Oakland?
We had to go to Samar, and then I had to wait for one of our VR-13 planes flew from Samar down to Manus, which was all at night, you know.
Right.
It was sort of a little scary.
But when the plane that had all the phonograph records that you weren't sure if it was going to make it, that was a DC-3 to fly from Alameda to Honolulu?
No, it flew from actually they took off from Oakland, and they had like 12 planes, and they had 4 groups of 3, at least, maybe more. And in one of those DC-3s, they had a navigator. So that they were just, it was like having a little insurance.
Right.
But,
Where did it land?
well, they landed at Honolulu and then they fueled up again. But they had, I think the basic, I'm just remembering now that the normal gallonage on the max on a DC-3 is 800 gallons. There was at least 400 on the left and 400 on the right in the wings. And that was, but they had 1,600 gallons when they were going from, and that too, I don't mean, and you know, that was in the phonograph records and the extra gas.
It was probably a very long takeoff roll.
Yeah, but they all got off fine, and they made it. And then, of course, they had to go down the chain to Johnson. And
So what's the right sequence for getting from Oakland down to all the different islands in south latitude?
okay, Olathe. Well, I went from Olathe, and that was in January of 45, and in February of 45, I went to Allaire 2, which was the PB2 was.
No, I mean to get on an airplane from Oakland. The sequence would be Oakland to Honolulu, Honolulu to Guam,
Johnson
Island,
Kwajalein, and then Guam, and then Samar.
and is Samar where Manus is?
No,
Okay.
Samar was up in the Philippines. We weren't based up in the Philippines. At the end of the war, we were based in Samar.
Okay, so I wanna get the geography right. Go after Honolulu, you go to Johnson Island,
Right,
and then to Kwajalein,
right.
and then from Kwajalein to Guam,
Kwajalein to Guam, right,
and then from Guam to Samar,
right.
and then from Samar to where?
Well, it wasn't a daily flight, but it was, I rode it was news to me that they had DC-4s going up there to Samar.
But from Samar down to where, to Manus?
To Manus, yes.
And how long of a flight would Samar to Manus be?
I check it in the book, my logbook, that was the one where I got in trouble.
But pretty long flight? Because
Yeah.
Samar's in the northern hemisphere and Manus is down in the southern hemisphere.
Well, yeah, but it's just barely, I think Samar is like 10 degrees north latitude, big deal, you know, you're
Yeah.
pretty close to the equator.
Right. And then from Manus, which is where VR-13 was based,
Right.
what types of flights would you take out of Manus?
Well, it was pretty simple. We went around the clock, we didn't care what the weather was.
Or what time of day it was?
In fact, the first flight I had, I just noticed it in my book there. The guy had just come back. My captain just came back from from leave of absence. He's not having a nervous breakdown or anything, but that was where it was raining like hell, and it was a 2 o'clock flight to go down to Biak, which is 400 miles further west.
From
Now,
Manus?
From Manus, yeah. Manus is in sort of the eastern portion of the
Indonesia?
the East Indies, if you can let me use that as an all-inclusive thing, but not down so far as to get down to...
New Guinea?
Well, no, it is New Guinea right there, but I'm just talking about that place out in where they have... it's really near, I guess, the Vietnam or whatever over there, where they just have a bunch of gooks over there or whatever.
Oh, God.
But anyway,
can't think of the name of which place? The place that's
Well,
south?
the name of the islands that are in a string going down.
Indonesia?
Indonesia, yeah, that's a bunch of islands.
Yeah.
Now there's Java. Java is in that's the East Indies.
But just because we only have just a few minutes left, where would you go from Manus? What would be your places that you go from Manus?
Okay, you go from Manus to Biak to Peleliu, which is an island right out in the Pacific there, but it's a couple of hundred miles from Biak, and it's a couple of hundred miles from Samar. So we would go through there. I don't know why, but
It's Betty. Oh no, it's TJ.
sorry. And we go west for 400 miles
Mm-hmm.
to Biak, and then we refuel, and then we go to Palau, which is about 300 miles up into the ocean here.
Uh-huh.
And then we didn't have to refuel there. We had enough fuel to get to Samar, and then we go to Samar. And that's how we got up to the Philippines.
Oh, okay. And then you go from.
And then later in the war, we moved up from Manus and moved our base up to Samar, because then we concentrated on the shuttle that went around all of the islands of the Philippines.
Now, from Samar, you could get to Clark,
Oh yeah, sure.
like 3 hours or so.
Well, it wasn't even that long, I don't think. Everything was pretty close together.
Yeah.
It was like maybe 2 hours. Going over to Palawan, which was that long banana thing.
Right.
It was like 300 miles across the water here, and there was a big checkpoint in the middle, like a reef.
Mm-hmm.
And,
You think it's bigger socks? First I wanted to get cool water. Is the stuff in the express clean or dirty?
Yeah, it's clean. I just washed it. So just the last thing I wanted to know is how do you get to Zamboanga?
when you do the shuttle out of Samar, and we did it even before we moved up there.
Mm-hmm.
We get up early in the morning and we fly all day, and we leave Samar. I'll show you a good picture of the Philippines. I'm going to buy a map of the Philippines, and when I can of it too. But we leave Samar and we go to Cebu, which is about 40 miles, 50 miles across this water.
From Samar to Cebu?
Yeah, and in front of Cebu was a bunch of, we usually had destroyers and battle wagons and everything right there, and there was a lot of protection around there to make sure nobody's going to come in and sink them. But anyway, then you go from there down to Zamboanga. You just go south. It's south. And you land down there, and that's where the monkeys have no tails. And then the next leg is about a 300-mile thing across the water. That's the middle. There's a lot of water in the middle of the Philippines.
Right.
And there was a reef there. It was about 1/3 of the way over, so you could take a time check on that, and then remember it was like 2/3 to go.
Right.
And you go over to Palawan.
Right.
And then when you came back, we usually, and this was just like taking all day, and we would come back to Cebu, and then we would come home to Samar.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a full day flying and landing on the mattresses.
That's great. When they shut down Manus and moved it up to Samar,
Yeah.
was it still VR-13 or did it become
Yeah,
VR
it was
something else?
VR-13.
So it's still VR-13.
Yeah, but it's getting close to the end because, this was early fall and it was after the officers and all
Right.
that stuff.
So by the time it got down to Samar, then pretty much the war was over?
Well, yeah.
And then was that Was VR-13 your last squadron on active duty?
Right. That's what I show here, 2,220 miles, 22 hours. And,
Total.
Total. And then I just posted Philadelphia down here and put in 30 hours.
Right, which
that
got
was
lost.
really up front.
Right.
So I feel much more comfortable having gone through this, and I can always look back and know exactly about where things were.
That's great. Last thing I wanted to ask you is if you talk about the various jobs you had at Eastern.
Oh,
You know, say from like 1966 through like 1974.
you don't do that now, do you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to go in detail, but just
Yeah, well,
like your first job, your second job, your third job.
I was slowly getting screwed over by Americans, and I would have had to go back to New York, and we weren't going to go back to New York. So, it's too expensive to live there.
Yeah.
And so I just got tired of it, and Uncle Al, who was a big criminal, he used to tell us how he had the generals during the war on their knees for him to release food to them. Anyway, just a plain WAPO criminal.
They worked at American.
Yeah. And he eventually went to jail, I think, because he got involved in the catering subsidiary, and he was
Stealing or
pulling
whatever.
money out or something, or I don't know what he was doing, but I could vouch that he was a real criminal, even though I didn't have to know what he was doing.
You'd have been happy to testify.
Yeah, we traveled with him, and you can tell how when you're living with people, not in their rooms, but on the road,
Right.
you can see what kind of a criminal
Yeah.
the guy is.
But your first job when you got down in November of 1966 down to Miami, what was your initial
My initial
position?
My initial pay raise by Mr. Wilson to get the job, I was making like 9,000 or maybe 10,000
At American.
American.
What was your job title at American when you left?
Oh, I was developing computer systems for the maintenance operation, and it was pretty interesting. But they weren't going to pay me much, and that was the whole problem.
So what was your raise up to at Miami?
I was given a $5,000 year raise, and and then when they moved us, Bob Wilson had them clean the house, and pay for that, and the American Eastern paid a heck of a lot of expenses for me just moving here.
What, cleaning out the 6012 house?
Moving to the, what was the name of the
Clifford's house?
The Clifford's house.
But whose house did he pay to have cleaned?
The Clifford's house.
Oh, he had
it
the
it
Clifford's
wasn't
house
being
cleaned.
lived in at the time, and we had to go around and clean the windows and
Oh, I
sweep the
see.
floors and blah, blah, blah.
So Eastern was pretty good. They helped you get
yeah.
down there.
Well, it was Bob Wilson. He was very generous.
How did you meet Bob Wilson?
Well, he was working for Eastern at the time. He was Charlie Nichols' boss, and he just was my boss.
But how did you find out about the Eastern job, or how did you meet?
Oh, I found it out through Charlie Nichols because he came down, he advertised or went through a travel agency.
A job
A job agency to get the job. He was division control, his job was the division control of maintenance.
And he'd worked at American?
Oh yeah, he worked for me, more or less, at American.
And so he became division controller of maintenance in Miami, and then recommended that maybe you come down to Miami and work at Eastern?
He and I were pretty thick, and so I really wanted to get the heck out of America because they weren't treating me well.
Right.
And what the general procedure was that they every 2 or 3 years they would cut about 10% or more of the middle management.
Right. To keep the costs down.
And just if you weren't doing anything exceptional, well, don't get the heck out of here.
Yeah. So were you a manager, your very first Eastern position?
Yeah, I was manager of computer systems. And you see, and then I was basically representing Sam Higginbottom, because he got a promotion, and he had operations, not just maintenance.
Right.
And then I gave some training. He wanted some training to the middle management people, and I worked out some good training too, so they could understand computers better.
That's good.
And then
Sam Higginbottom was the vice president of maintenance.
yeah, then he was senior vice president of operations, which included
Everything.
most everything.
Like in-flight and...
Right.
So the flight attendants, the pilots, and the machinists.
Right.
That's a pretty big job.
And it was pretty rewarding, and Bob Wilson, bless his heart, of course he's dead now. All these people are dying. But he gave me a nice raise. Anyway, so I was making like $15,000, and at the end I was making $45,000. So along the way I got. The only thing was that I had to give 20% back, like poor Delters do, and whatever they have to do and all that baloney. But he was very generous. He was sort of a straight-laced guy, like I told you. He wouldn't let his son watch TV.
And then watch Charlie's Angels.
It'd be a real uprising. A lot of parents are like that. But he had a very nice, Mrs. Wilson she was a singer, I don't know if you knew.
No.
When we go down to her house and she sang for us.
Where, did they live near us?
No, they lived down in Coconut Grove in the moorings, which was pretty la-di-da. It was on the water side of the main street you go through.
Right, Red Road, Old Cutler?
Well, you go through this
Main Highway?
main highway, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And then that goes right into Coconut Grove.
Right.
And then make a right turn, go down to where the sailboats are.
Right, Dinner Key. Dinner Key. So you were manager of computer systems, and then what was your next job?
Well, my next job was in 71, I guess. And the division controller was a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
The division controller of flight ops was a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Dad?
Yeah, honey.
I have tea time.
Okay, don't come inside with roller skates on, sweet boy.
Okay, can I, is there any cookies in there?
The one that you poured before?
Yeah.
Here. Here you go, sweetie. You can just leave it on the table out there, okay? Okey doke?
He's a good boy.
He's a good boy. Okay.
So what was I
So
saying?
you said in 1971 the division controller was a
1971.
pilot.
The Vic Calais was a pilot, and he had been with the company, and I guess he had some kind of a flying background, and he transferred to flight operations pilots, and so they had to replace him as division controller. and I was vying for that spot.
With how many other people?
I don't know, like 15 or 20, I guess. It was really it was a big boost to my morale. And as I say, John O'Neill was unfortunately, Tipler, who was the vice president of flight operations. And he had, and Borman was in on it because he was coming in at that time
As a vice
working
president.
as a vice president. So I got to meet Borman, and and then I was working on the budgets with Borman, and it was a pretty good opportunity. But unfortunately, if Easton had injected a little more real good management and just tried to continue making profits all the time and not just doing a bunch of stupid stuff. Why? But you see, Borman, he didn't even understand about attrition. It's like talking to a child that you say, well, we retired 20 pilots this month, and he said, well, okay, we got to go get the 20 more, And I said, no. You see, we got to eat that attrition, and just now we're a little short on pilots, but we're not hurting that bad. And you just don't keep filling the spots where you can save money. So
That's what Delta's doing right now. Is they're shrinking.
So there was a lot of people who hated my guts, though, because they wanted the job and they didn't really qualify for it. Well, there were some engineers that one guy said, well, how the hell did you get in there? And I said, well, I said, you can read my credentials. It's in the newspaper. I wrote it out myself. I mean, I was a CPA, and that's the only place the CPA ever helped me, And I wrote it up, and it sounded very good. And I spent 20 years with American Airlines, and how can you beat that?
And you had five or 6 years of flying experience in the military.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I want
That's
to.
like John, when we used to have periodic, the head of the flight ops would have a monthly staff meeting, and we'd have it at different domiciles. We'd have it at JFK, we'd have it at Miami, over, and I think you went in when this guy who flew his last flight on a 1011.
Walt Brady.
Yeah, Brady. I think he was director of flight for Miami.
Right.
Miami domicile.
Right, Miami.
Yeah. So anyway, and just things went bad, and then they brought the Cubans in, and they were supposed to get rid of all the Americans, I guess.
Well, they did a great job. That's mission accomplished. Okay, well, I got to get ready for work, but let me commend you on a great job.
Well, thanks, Ted. I'm happy I did this because I should have done this long ago, but you see, it's a good outline. You can see where things were happening and where things weren't happening. But some of the high points, the American Airlines checkout on the
DC-3.
DC-3 was a magnificent, thorough training, and as I say, the head of the guy teaching us the maintenance of the DC-3, he could draw you a picture of anything in the plane.
That's great.
Of course, that wasn't as complicated as a 767.
No, but for its day, it sure was.